Welcome to a Skewed Chimp.
So let me make it clear what this video is and what this video is not. This video is me showing you how bad I am at things that other people make look easy. What this video is not is a tutorial. If you want a tutorial for how to sharpen tools using whatever sharpener you want, there are hundreds of those, if not thousands of those, that are readily available. I have neither the skill level nor the arrogance that it would take in order to create a tutorial for other people when I barely know which way to point my skew when I'm using it, much less sharpening it. So this is definitely not a tutorial. Really, nothing that I do should be deemed a tutorial. Pretty much everything I produce ought to be viewed as a cautionary tale. So what this video is simply a documentation of the struggles that I go through as a new person trying to acquire a new set of skills in an area that I have absolutely no background knowledge in. So this is really just here so that anybody that's interested in doing so can share the experiences that I have as I learn a new skill set. Today, I wanted to show you how I sharpen things. The sharpening stone is set to 1000 grit or its equivalent, whatever that means. And I did that with the SP650 that came with my sharpening system. Right now my tools are already preset. I've had a sharpener before and I've sharpened them before, so most of my tools are preset. There is one issue, however, that I'll tell you about in a little bit. But since they're all preset, then I should be able to sharpen them up just fine using the 1000 grit or its equivalent that's already set on the stone. Now, one thing that I needed to be aware of, and that I'm glad I learned on my previous sharpener, is that the stone sucks up a lot of water, and so I need to be careful not to leave it outside in the weather. The stone itself absorbs quite a lot of water when you're getting ready to use it, and my garage doesn't have any kind of insulation, and there's no heater or cooling system inside of the garage either. I'm not real sure what I'm going to do in the winter when the cold weather sets in, but I'll at the very least have to remember to take the stone in after I'm done sharpening every time I use it so that the water inside the stone doesn't freeze and fracture the sharpening stone. That's just an interesting aside though. One of the reasons that I'm sharpening my tools at 1000 grit today is because that's where the stone was already set. I had set it that way when I was sharpening some knives because I wanted the knives to be really sharp, and so that happens to be where the stone was left, and so that's what grit I'll be using to sharpen my tools today. Beyond that, it's my understanding, and by that I mean I've been told a number of times by a couple of different people that the sharper your tools are, the longer they stay sharp, and so you should probably have them as sharp as possible without getting OCD about it. Even though I'm not that kind of a scientist, when I think about how the physics of sharpening things and cutting wood with sharp objects goes, that seems to make sense to me, that sharper objects stay sharper longer. In any case, that's why we'll be doing this the way that we're doing it today, and without further ado. Alright, so the tools that we're going to be working with today are a 3/4 inch roughing gouge, right here. That's a 3/4 inch roughing gouge. A 3/8 inch spindle gouge. A 1/2 inch skew chisel, a 1/2 inch round nose scraper, and a 1/4 inch parting tool. I also have this 3/8 inch fingernail bowl gouge. Now, one more note really quickly. Apparently, once you know what you're doing and you're comfortable with the method and you're familiar with all of the tools and the jigs, this whole process only takes you about 15 minutes. But just so that you're aware, dear viewer, this process took me a couple of hours. Partially because I'm recording everything as I go, and partially because of a problem that I had with my parting tool that I'll show you later on in the video. So to start off, I usually start with my gouges, partially because they're the most complicated, but for whatever reason, they also seem to come out the best, so I use them at the beginning to boost my morale. To help me get everything lined up, I use the TTS 100 from Tormek. In this case, it only took me about a minute or so to get the tool rest a sufficient space away from the sharpening stone. So there's a reason that I go into detail about some of this stuff. I don't know if you guys are using the same sharpening systems that I am or not. I don't know if I'm doing it correctly. I don't know if you guys have tricks of the trade that you want to share with me that might help me out. But if anybody is at all interested in watching this stuff, then that gives them an opportunity to see something that I'm doing wrong, or at least that I could be doing better, and to let me know about it. In this case, I'm still using the TTS 100, and on the back, when you turn it over, there are 3 different slots that you can put your tools into, and they're 65, 75, and 85 millimeters respectively. What I did in the past was I went through and I measured all of my tools to make sure that I had them lined up correctly the very first time I ever sharpened them, so they were fresh out of the box. And when I did, I was at least clever enough to write down the angles, which slots to use to hook the jigs up, and so on, so that I had all those details available to me the next time I did it. So in this case, I'm starting with my spindle gouge. On the back side of the TTS 100, I'm using slot number 2, which is 65 millimeters. The jig I'm using is the SVD 186, I think, and it's another Tormek jig. The elbow for the SVD 186 is set to slot number 2. And as I get close to having it kind of tied down, having it in place, I then put my gouge into the second slot for 65 millimeters, and I press the SVD 186 up against that spot, and I secure it. So the next thing I do is the same thing that you'll see in most tutorials that are out there. I color up the edge of the chisel with a little bit of permanent marker. Now, one of the things that I've already figured out is that you don't actually have to color in the whole damn chisel. You can just do part of it. If you get one line that cuts from the base of the bevel to the top of the bevel, then it's going to match the rest of the curvature of the chisel, and you don't actually need to color the whole thing in. So next, I'll take my tool, which should sit like this, and I will place this onto the tool rest here and kind of lean it in there just a little bit. And it should fit pretty close. Then what I'll do is, by hand, I'll drive the wheel backwards just a touch to see if I've got it lined up right. If I do have it lined up correctly, then you should see, aha, if I can hold this steady, then you should see a complete line all the way through this. And you don't. You can only see it right here, which tells me I need to back off the rest from the wheel just a wee bit so that I can get one solid line through there. Which is where the micro dial can help, I suppose. That looked better. There we go. So, we're close. We're very close. You can see that there is ever so slight of a line all the way through this thing. Now I'm sorry I'm messing up the camera, but my vision is not good up close, and I'm not making this any better for you guys, but you can kind of see, there we go, now that we're in the light, that there's a very thin line all the way through, but I think I can do it a little bit better. Don't do it, take the win! Actually, that looks really good. I'm going to leave it there. I'm happy with that position, and I've learned already, briefly, not to mess with good things. Apologies for the blurry video here. I try to pass it off as an artistic choice, but I don't think you'd be buying that. I turn it on. Begin in the middle with the tool in an upright position is what I was taught. And then lay it down to the sides and make sure you go all the way around as far as you can. And how you know, again, whether or not you're getting a good cut is look to see if you're cleaning it all off. And if you're getting all of the ink off, and I'm getting the vast majority of the ink off, except in certain places, then you've got it lined up correctly. And honestly, the part that matters, of course, is the cutting edge. If you've got the cutting edge right, then the rest of it is aesthetic or superficial, and will work itself out in time. But then when I'm done, just a quick drag on the old towel, and you can see that we've got a pretty nice edge on that. And it's nice and shiny. Looking good. It's a good cutting edge right there. So all I need to do now is hone it up. And I've got my honing wheel already set. It's already pretty inundated with honing oils and stuff. I probably have too much on, to be honest with you. But I just give that a quick hone. Check the edge, make sure that I don't have, check the edge and make sure that I don't have what's that, a burl on the end. And I don't, so we're good to go. This tool is completely done and ready to be used on my next project. The next item on the list for us to sharpen is this 3/8 inch bowl gouge by Sorby. What's nice about the bowl gouge is that it's also cut at 45 degrees. So that's the same angle of cut that's on my spindle gouge. So that makes that really convenient. Everything lines up exactly the same. For whatever reason, it kind of surprised me that this would be true because the bowl gouge has a fingernail edge to it. And I didn't expect for that edge to line up the same way that a regular edge would, but it does. And so this clip showing you me struggling with a permanent marker on the edge of a chisel that's 1/4 of an inch wide explains why I did not become an artist. And so we'll go through the same process that we did for the spindle gouge, which is simply to take the 186 and put it onto the tool rest as you're supposed to. Then give it a good test grind just to see how well you're doing. There is a line right here that goes right down it. So we have correctly, there, that's a great image of it. You can see that there's a spot right there that is that's perfect. That's perfect alignment. So with that in place, and that's why I do them back to back, is because they should match. And I'll spare you watching me fumble around with this thing for the next several minutes. It did take me several minutes though, because it kept flopping all over the place and I'm not holding it steady, and I'm sharpening it the way a person who has not sharpened a whole lot of stuff in their lives would sharpen things. That said, at this point, this is pretty self-guiding. The honing wheel is something that I struggle with a little bit. I'm not real sure I'm using it correctly. If you happen to be watching and know how to use one correctly, let me know. I put a couple of small scars into the honing wheel while I was doing this, not very deeply, but a little bit. And I've also got a layer of honing gel sitting on top of the honing wheel, and I don't really see that in most other videos. I'm not sure if I've got too much on here or not. If someone out there has some insights, I'd really appreciate them. So then the finished product you could look at, and you can see that we've gotten all of the ink off of, which means that all parts of it touched the grinding wheel, and it did it very quickly, and it's on 1,000 grit, the grinding wheel, so it's a very little metal removed in this process, and you can see that that's just a really nice finish. Now, it's not perfect because I'm not perfect. The machine is capable of doing much better than this. I'm kind of a sloppy mess though right now, so this is how good I get it. But the important part is that the cutting edge, where's my pen? It's hard to see. The cutting edge is really, really sharp, and that's the important part. All the rest, kind of, you can have errors over here where you don't line up perfectly, but it's the cutting edge that's important. If you are cutting with this part of your tool after sharpening it, you have already made a huge mistake. Next is the roughing gouge. I set the roughing gouge at a depth of 85 millimeters from the jig that it's supposed to be used with. Because of that, I can't use the TTS 100 because the distance from the end of the gouge to where the jig sits is too far. Instead, what I do is I have a ruler that's laid out at the edge of the table, and I do my best to approximate it as closely as I can, and then I just kind of finesse it from there. So I'm just going to cover up the tip, because if I can get a straight line down this part, then it should match all the way around. So all you need to do is that little center part. Let's find out. After coloring up the tip of the roughing gouge and making sure that everything was aligned, I went ahead and got started on the sharpening. But it's also not that hard, so I make sure I've got whatever burrs off of it I need to. And then got a pretty good edge on that. Up next is my parting tool. Now, the parting tool should be one of the easiest of all of the tools to sharpen. It's really straightforward. However, I've managed to train wreck this, and I'll show you what I mean. If you look at this particular parting tool, which I've just knocked off the center here, if you look at this particular parting tool, you can see that although this is lined up straight, this shoulder is a little bit farther forward than this shoulder, and that's because this shoulder is cut at a 55-degree angle, and this one is cut at a 45-degree angle. And I did that because I measured it incorrectly the last time I had it on the sharpener, and I really went to town on it because I was trying to get it to conform to the shape of my new wet sharpener, and I went really vigorously, and so I got that dug in here quite substantially before I realized that I had set it to the wrong point. So the problem now is that I've got a 55-degree sharpener, or a 55-degree edge on this side, but not this side. And I'm not entirely sure how to fix it, except I think I do have it figured out. I think that what I will do is, this is the side that is cut correctly, and this is the side that is cut incorrectly. I think that I will set my sharpener up so that this side is cut correctly for sharpening, and then simply turn it over and force this side into that shape. So it will look a little awkward for quite a long time, but I believe that will slowly return the correct angularity to the piece. At least I hope so. That's what I'm going to try. So that's where we're at. After getting the parting tool set up inside the jig, I drive it forward off the end of a table so that it's about 105 millimeters deep into the table, and I use a ruler to measure it out. This is the side that's cut correctly, and it's the one that's colored up right now. This side is not cut correctly. That's the longer one. It's off, and it's at a 45-degree angle, I think. This is at a 55. So I want this side to be how I set up the tool. So I'm going to take this and place it on here. And so that's what it should look like, essentially, to get you started. Just to get going, that's what it should look like when it clears off the paint. And that really did almost wipe the whole thing clean. I mean, totally. It's easy for somebody that's new to turning to get the idea that all of these measurements are supposed to be exact, that the degrees are supposed to match exactly, that the length of a given distance from the edge of a tool to where the jig is supposed to be exact. It's not supposed to be exact. Well, I mean, maybe it's supposed to be exact, but it does not have to be exact. Like, if the skew is crooked, it's not ideal, but it's certainly not a game ender either. The reality is that as long as you can control the chisel without it getting thrown all over the place on your piece of spinning wood, then you're in pretty good shape. As long as it will cut what you need it to cut, it doesn't even really need to be all that straight. Just in case any other person that's getting into turning is a little bit confused by that, this is not an exact science, and it does not have to be an exact science. There are people that are very good at this, and so for them, they can get measurements almost exactly correct all of the time. But in all honesty, this is a very free-flowing form of woodworking. It doesn't have to be perfect. Your tools don't have to be sharpened perfectly every single time. At least that's the conclusion I'm coming to. If anybody feels differently, please enlighten me. And so you can see that's a nice edge right there. It hasn't been honed out or anything yet. And now, just for curiosity's sake and to see where I'm at in the process, I'm going to color up the other side now, just to see how badly I messed this up and see how long it's going to take me to get it back to right. Because all I'm going to do is turn this over now, and I'm going to. This was the side that was cut wrong. This is the one with the wrong angle on it. This is a 45-degree angle or less. I'm not sure. And I'm going to just flip it over. This one's cut correctly. This one's cut incorrectly. And I'm just going to take the correct setting that I had for this and apply it to this side. So here goes nothing. And so this is actually not going to be as horrible as I thought. You can see that there's a little bit that I need to get off, but not a whole lot. That's not just a bad angle. There's a little where I've cut it wrong in the past as well. So I'm going to work on this for a little while, but essentially this is it and it's ready to go. That's not good. What's that sound? Oh, it's this thing rattling. That scared me. I've got the edge that I need on it on both sides, and it'll work for parting. And the rest will just have to be worked in over time, hopefully with not any more mistakes. So that's the good side. And this is the not so good side. And you can see up at the top here, there's a part that just doesn't match the rest of it in terms of its cut. And that's annoying, but you know, we'll deal with it. And so it's not perfect, like it's not like glass or anything, but for a new guy, I'm okay with it. This is turning out all right, and it's certainly sharp enough. I know I'm not doing everything perfectly, but I know that most of this stuff is sharp. This is not as sharp as it could be because of the divot, that part that's shaped differently right on the tip of this thing. It looks all wonky right up here. Right up here, but it's sharp enough. It's sharp enough for our purposes. So next up is my skew, and it's a 1/2-inch skew. And the only reason that I'm really even messing with it, it's pretty sharp still. I mean, like, wow, it's really sharp. I guess it's for practice, but it's quite sharp right now, really. So this is just going to be a quick touch-up. That's what we'll be doing. Can I just add that it would be really nice if Tormek would add a slot and a dowel here and here, so that if we wanted to, when we're putting this on here, we could use that to help brace it, to make sure that it doesn't do this crap all over the place. Wobble back and forth, go like that, because it does when you're using tools like a parting tool, and it's in here. It's very easy to give it a little bit too much tilt one way or another, and so that can get it off center just a little bit. So it would just be a nice feature, just an idea. All the other tools that we've sharpened tonight have used the slot A in this measuring jig. However, this tool, the Skew, requires the use of slot B. I think that looks right, so we'll put that on there. And now let's see how close our measurements came. That actually lines up really well. That lines up pretty well indeed. So let me color this up. And we'll see how well that grind works for us. Give that a second to dry and I'll be right back. Okay, the pen is dying, but you can see that it's colored up now. Let's give it a turn on the... Just tap it dry. Yeah, and hopefully, all right, now it took us long enough. It took me long enough. I hope you guys can see that there we go, right there. Right there. It's not quite all the way to the bottom of this. It could do a little bit better, but just a tiny bit better. And I don't want to make it any worse by trying to be overly perfectionistic. I just want to get into there and get it going. So we're going to go with this. And so this is the side we started with, and it's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. You can see that there's a nice edge on it with most of the ink gone, and what isn't gone is, imperfections in probably previous shots that I've taken at this. But that's a nice clean edge and a nice clean blade. And then if we turn it around, this is the other side. Now it's not as clean, certainly, at least on this part. Whoa, sorry. This part is not nearly as clean. You can see all of the issues, like right here and up here, where it's not getting a clean cut against the grind. But the important part is that the blade, the sharp part where you're actually doing the cutting, I got that clear, and I got the base. So what that tells me is that this is probably an adjustment that I needed to make, because I needed to get this accustomed to this wheel. Remember, the last time I sharpened this particular tool was on a different grinder completely. So this one's never touched the Tormek before. And so the curvature of the Tormek might be slightly different, or there might be some other variation in the two sharpeners that I'm not familiar with, that I can't guess at. And so that might be what explains the difference. But as long as I'm hitting the bottom and the top, the rest of it will get worked in over time. And that's the edge that I want. So I'm pretty happy with this. This turned out okay, guys. I don't actually know how to hone anything, just so you guys are aware of that too. I pretty much just gently let it ride here for a little bit, and then I check to make sure that the burr is missing, and that's the extent of what I do. So that's it, and then I do this to get the dust from the honing wheel off, to get the honing gel off. So just to make sure that it's clean, I just do that, and then there we go. That's our tool. Okay, so the last tool to sharpen tonight is the scraper tool, which I really enjoyed using in my last project. It was a lot of fun, and you can see it's not in bad shape by any stretch of the imagination, but I want to touch it up, both for my own practice and so that I can show it to you guys. Now for scraper, I'll be using this jig, which is just a flat tool rest. And so it's got a hole here, and it goes right over the tool rest, and then you kind of snug it up just a little bit to hold it in place. That's just barely on there. And then I take this tool and try to line it up visually as best I can to make a straight line and kind of get it in the ballpark of what I want. And I try to do that without getting the tool rest ground up against the stone. So I'll give that a go and make some adjustments, and I'll be right back with you. The further away this bar is from this, the easier it is to make mild adjustments to the pad. So you actually don't want it right in front of the stone any more than you have to, because this allows you to make simple adjustments. But let's go ahead and give this a quick, I want to make sure I've got it colored up correctly. And part of the reason that I'm doing this, guys, by the way, is so that you guys can tell me what I'm doing wrong and give me pointers and feedback. So that's why it's so important to me in this video that I show you that I've got something completely colored up, And then that's important, put it on here and give her the old test drive. Dry it off. And then show you as best I can that there's a line right down the middle of that sucker. Right there. And that sucker's lined up real nice. That, honestly, I'm pleased with myself to be able to hit this line right here that well. Means I think I hit pay dirt. All right, so let's give this a go. There we go. And so then all you do is you set it on here and kind of rotate it. As evenly as you can. And yeah, that's really all you do. This is absolutely not scientific in the least. In fact, I'm amazed this thing even stays round. Whoa. Good going. Good going. It doesn't take but a second. And you can see that already it's got nice clean cut on it. And it's got all the ink off of it, at least in the important spots. So, doing fine. I'm going to touch it up just a little bit more. Alright guys, tell me what you think of this. Go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments. Go ahead and take a look at it. Any suggestions, thoughts, ideas, questions, criticisms, whatever. Go ahead and leave your thoughts in the comments. But all of our tools are sharpened and we're ready to go to town on the next project.